Is Kashin Koji's decision to kill Kobu something ideal? I mean, if Kashin Koji really succeeds in killing Kobu, does that mean he has changed the fate of Ida's death or even Himawari's? And are all of these events connected in the future timeline? Well, at least for the next 8 minutes, let's talk briefly about chapter 30. But before that, I don't ask for much. But please, help me get this video to 100 likes. Thank you guys. So yeah, talking about fate, of course at this point, we can't absolutely guess who is controlling the direction of fate, right? The Shinju may seem like the main threat, but the further we go, the clearer it becomes that the greatest danger actually comes from human choices themselves. And when we see how every decision, whether moral or not, is made without even the slightest consideration of morality, at this point, the story of Boruto is no longer just about physical battles, but a war of ideology, morality, and sacrifice. Every decision, whether small or large, inevitably has its own consequences, whether it leads to the worst possible outcome or the opposite. And simply put, one wrong step can drag many lives to the brink of destruction. We are at a phase in the story where the future is not determined by who is the strongest, but by who is brave enough to bear the consequences. Amidst the chaos of invasion, there is a common thread that slowly ties everything together: the fate of death, silent betrayal, and dilemmas with no right answers. All the characters seem forced to choose between cold logic that promises results or fragile ethics that preserve humanity. Yep, that is at least the sentence that I think is very relevant to describe the current situation. Shikamaru is an example. He is now at a cruel crossroads in his life, not as a hokage pursuing power, but as the only rational figure still holding back the shinobi world from falling deeper into the abyss of chaos. That position is not his ambition, but as long as he stands, the system still has control. If Shikamaru falls, it's not just the leadership structure that collapses, but also the hope for reasonable decisions in the midst of the crisis against the Shinju. But behind that, there is Kashin Koji, who has ambitions and a way of thinking that are completely opposite. He is a figure who always chooses the fastest path without hesitation and without compromise. For him, lives are just variables that can be sacrificed as long as the future can be secured. This is where the main conflict of the story is formed, which I think is really exciting, because as we know, at this point, two perspectives on the future are truly at stake. Is a better future justified if it must be paid for with the deaths of innocent people? Or is that future wrong from the start because it is built on forced sacrifice? Yeah, you know what I mean, right? As has been the case in recent chapters, Boruto firmly rejects this logic. For him, killing one person to save many is not a strategy, but a moral failure. This attitude makes him even more isolated, or perhaps more accurately, a rational attitude towards humanity that may not apply to himself. So what I mean is, saving the lives of his friends and the people around him is an absolute priority over himself. And even though Boruto's path is a difficult one because no one understands his decisions and even his sacrifices, at least as the story progresses, eyes begin to open and some hearts begin to accept the reality that Boruto is not what they thought he was. And of course, to support all of this, or perhaps as a crucial point, Inojin becomes part of it. In the midst of a decision he never imagined before, Inojin becomes the center of the decision in the end. He is caught between orders and conscience, between rationality and empathy. Inojin is neither a villain nor a hero. He is merely a pawn in a grand scheme that he doesn't even fully understand. Yep, just like I said earlier, because after all, he is now faced with a bitter reality. Silence is also a choice, and that choice can take someone's life. And regardless of what his decision will ultimately be, or even plot twist will happen to Lord Kobu, at least at this point, Inojin has complete control over someone's life. Because once again, Inojin's dilemma is not just about killing or saving. It's about identity and personal responsibility. Will he be someone who lets evil happen in order to go with the flow? Or someone who dares to defy cruel logic in order to defend the values he has believed in from the beginning? Because in my opinion, believe it or not, every choice at this point creates a chain reaction. The consequences don't stop at just one person. The future of Ida, Himawari, even the direction of the conflict against Jura, all depend on the small decisions made now. And just like my personal admiration for Kishimoto or Ikamoto, they don't seem to be preparing for who will win or lose. Rather, they are preparing for who can still be called human after all this is over. Boruto may lose strategically and have to endure suffering for longer, but that is where perceptions begin to change. Slowly, people begin to realize that Boruto is not a threat, but a resistance against a future built in the wrong way. And if we return to the original context, will what happens in the next chapter, such as sacrificing Kobu's life, determine whether they can prevent the deaths of Ida and Himawari? Because after all, it seems that we really have to look at the deaths of Hima and even Ida from various perspectives. In other words, the fate of death that follows Ida and Himawari is not only caused by the Shinju, but there are certain people who support that fate of death to happen. Because try to imagine or consider this. In the operation against Mamushi, Koji had no choice but to entrust this mission to Shikamaru and Boruto. And even though we know that Inojin also contributed to the success of this mission, at least Shikamaru and Boruto's roles were more crucial. Not only because Boruto is a singularity of fate, but also because Shikamaru, even though he is not a singularity of fate, truly represented or even determined the entire outcome of this operation. In other words, whether it was Boruto or Shikamaru, the two of them truly determined the outcome compared to Inojin himself. But the problem is, if Shikamaru is in a dangerous situation, and it could even lead to him being fired, removed from his position as Hokage, then it's not just Ida's fate or even Himawari's that is at stake. Kashin Koji himself will find it increasingly difficult to steer all of this in a better direction, because there is one thing I remember, and it should make sense. Believe it or not, every decision Koji made, including killing Kobu, was the best choice out of all the options available. I mean, if you still remember the conversation between Koji and Ida, there was a moment when Ida was so relieved after finding out that Boruto and Kawaki had survived and returned after their battle against Jura in the Land of Wind. But according to Koji, that actually triggered something much worse in the future. And even with the fact that it triggered Mamushi's movement targeting Ida, it also meant that it would trigger something much worse, such as the death of Ida or even Hima. So, in conclusion, if Kobu's assassination is foiled, it will indirectly trigger something far worse in the future. But what exactly is it? I mean, who will be the next victim to bear the consequences of Kobu's failed assassination? Well, this is why I think the Boruto story is getting more and more exciting. So what is the actual point of all this, right? First, whether he likes it or not, Inojin will ultimately not take any action. That means he will just stay silent and inadvertently let Kobu die because of his inaction. But if there is a plot twist or someone comes to prevent Kobu's death, then there should be consequences in the future, like I said before. But in my opinion, these consequences are not about fate that can be prevented, but will be the actual end for Ida and Himawari. But if the person who prevents Kobu's death is Boruto, maybe Boruto wants to prove to Kashin Koji that without sacrificing someone else's life, he can still prevent Ida and Himawari's deaths. But at least for this case, maybe around 60–80% makes sense. But what do you think? Because after all, every decision Boruto makes always has alternatives. In short, when Koji concluded that he would die in the middle of the battle against Jura in the Land of Wind, Boruto, who should have died, managed to survive because he had prepared an alternative, knowing the consequences if he died while helping his friend fight in the Land of Wind. So, in conclusion, given that Boruto knew Hima and Ida were destined to die as Koji predicted, at this point he should have already prepared another alternative for the worst possible outcome that could happen in the future. Yeah, that's just how it is. But what do you think? So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please like it up to 100. Thank you for watching. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the next video. Bye-bye, Databayo.